everyone. I wanted to make a video pilfering from a conversation that I engaged in yesterday or the day before on WordPress about the titles High Priestess and High Priest, just because I'm trying to think if we've had this conversation on YouTube before. And I'm sure we have, because it's really not all that creative, but it's really interesting. And the use of not just the terms priest and priestess, but specifically high priest and high priestess in communities, especially as sometimes we see the terms used by solitaries. And I think what happened, because as you guys have noticed, I'm kind of bad at the internet, so I think there was a pagan blog prompt or something like that floating around, which is why I'm seeing some of these. But anyway, essentially the question is, how do you feel about people calling themselves high priest and high priestess? How do you feel about solitaries using these terms? That sort of thing. So I thought that I would tell you a little bit about how it works in my tradition, just because getting ahead of myself, and address some of the issues that I've seen people bring up, especially relating to age, because I think this is true for a lot of us, especially those of us in like Wiccan and Wiccan-esque and Wicca-inspired neo-pagan groups where we have high priests and high priestesses. A lot of us tend to associate those titles with age and wisdom and particular achievements that people are supposed to have reached, but particularly age. And things can get weird because I'm a high priestess in my tradition, and I'm 29, and that doesn't sit real well all the time. Like when I go to a pagan festival, and I'm not running around introducing myself as, hi, I'm High Priestess Thorn, HPS, because that would make me like a dick. But I thought that'd be a good place to kind of address that issue, since I sort of occupy it all the time. So the way I see it, the terms priest and priestess refer to particular relationships that an individual might have with a god or a spirit or some kind of entity that they serve, they have a relationship with, they worship, whatever qualifying term you want to use. So a solitary, and you see this in especially a lot of like eclectic Wiccan books and intro to pagan books, where we're supposed to be our own priests and priestesses. So of course we use the terms priest and priestess because we don't need mediators and that sort of thing. And I agree with that to a large extent. If you have these kinds of relationships that you personally feel warrant the title of priest or priestess, then, like, by all means, because it's totally up to me what you call yourselves. There's a form you can fill out for my approval. No. But I think priest and priestess is a term most relevant to the individual. Right? My individual relationship with a god. I'm a priestess to a particular god. To me, high priest and high priestess is a social term. It's a communal one. It's one that designates your relationship not so much with a god or goddess or spirit or whatever, although I'm not saying that that's unrelated, but I think it's a bigger indicator of what kind of relationship and what kind of standing you have with your community. Like in my tradition, I'm a Gardnerian, okay, and I'm specifically a Long Island line Gardnerian, and I know there are a lot, like, this is really confusing, and this video will probably never be made because I'll have to drink too much wine and start crying, but there are a number of Gardnerian lines, and we don't always get along, and that's just how it is. So anyway, so when I'm speaking specifically about like the people in my life, so I don't pretend to know everything or speak for everyone. But in my particular tradition, a high priest or a high priestess, what that means is that they have a particular role in the coven. Usually, primarily related to leadership and propagation of the tradition. It doesn't mean that their god phone is necessarily bigger, if that makes any sense. It doesn't mean that my voice is necessarily more important to our gods, okay? It means that I have particular roles and responsibilities when it comes to the other people in my tradition and in my coven specifically, right? And given that that's what the term means to me, it would make no sense if I were a solitary to refer to myself as high priestess. I have met some solitaries who do use those terms, and I think it's just a question of semantics, right? Like, I'm going to refer to myself as high priestess because in my tradition there aren't any other priestesses, so of course I would be high priestess, all right? And like when it's a semantic difference, like whatever, who cares? But those would be the differences for me. I am a priestess to my gods. I am a high priestess to my coven, if that makes sense. And that's why age isn't necessarily such like the big thing. In this particular blog that I've got called up right now, one of the replies, and I'll list the links if you guys want to check out these blogs. Actually, I just these weren't even people that I followed, and then I just stumbled into them during a search yesterday. But one person commented that she felt that these were terms that were earned as someone ages and as someone acquires wisdom and experience within the community. And I don't mean to discount that, because like those things are true. Like when we think about terms like elders or like sages, which you really don't see that term so much with Wiccans, but we think about people who are older than ourselves. We think about like wizened grandmothers and grandfathers, right? Like that's kind of the image that pops into people's heads. When people think high priestess, they usually don't think about like someone who necessarily looks like me, where like I'm like struggling to put my life together after school, and I'm not necessarily what comes to mind. But it's about my relationship with my coven. It doesn't mean that I have all the life experience or that I'm inherently kind of wise, right? The idea is that if you're going about things correctly and with integrity and sincerely, the wisdom will come eventually. But the point is fulfilling particular kinds of roles in the tradition, if that makes sense. They're not necessarily tied to age. So when I say that I'm a high priestess, it's not the equivalent of me saying I'm wise or I'm better, if that makes sense. Okay. I think that's mostly all I wanted to say. So I'm curious. I mean, like, if you guys, like, I'd be curious to know how you guys feel about the titles. If you use them yourselves, if you're a solitary, do you think of yourself as a priest or priestess? I know that's kind of a leap for some people. Like, I remember when I was practicing a more eclectic form, and I'm solitary. I'm alone in my bedroom all through high school and then college, before I got involved in any kind of group. And I never thought of myself as a priestess. It always felt like it felt like hubris or something, like I was being arrogant or vain. And I don't really think I ever thought of myself that way until I was initiated into Gardnerian craft. Because before I was Gardnerian, I was a dedicant in the Blue Star tradition. And in Blue Star, dedicants are not priests and priestesses. Priests and priestesses are clergy of the tradition. And, another thing I wanted to say. And again, it was about particular roles within the community. It didn't mean that I couldn't have a relationship with gods that was just as strong or just as important. It just meant that I didn't have a particular kind of function within our community. And I totally forgot the thing that I just remembered that I wanted to say. Blue Star, priests and priestesses, something. Dang it. Okay, well, I guess we'll never know what sort of wisdom was going to pour forth from me. So, anyway, yeah, so do you use the terms yourself? Is it a question of comfort? Is it, do you still think that, do you think age is a factor? I'd be really curious to know. So, that is all. All right, hope you guys are having a beautiful Monday. I totally remembered what I wanted to say. And it was triggered by me talking about Blue Star priests and priestesses and referring to them as clergy. And I'll tell you that clergy is a term that I personally feel uncomfortable with. And I can't really articulate why, because I want to say it has something to do with Christian associations and the implication that, like, the Christian model is somehow a prototype for religion. Like, well, Christians have clergy, therefore if we want to be a real religion, we have to have clergy too. All right. And I don't know if that's a good argument to make, but I think that's what the impulse is as to why it makes me uncomfortable. So here's the thing too about being a high priestess or high priest or whatever. To me, when I think about clergy, I think about the kinds of roles that Christian clergy have. And other traditions have these kinds of models too, but I'm much too ignorant to talk about them in any real way. So when we think about Christian clergy, they marry people, they do funeral rites, they do baptisms, they have, like, they might have chaplaincy ministries or things like that. Anyway, I don't do any of that stuff, okay? Like, a high priestess in my tradition might do those things, but that's not inherent. Like, I have no intention or desire to ever, like, marry anyone, okay, for example, largely because I have lots of feelings about marriage as an institution. But anyway, those things are not necessarily the same thing to me. And I think that's an important thing worth saying. I don't think that high priestess necessarily equals clergy, necessarily equals minister slash chaplain slash baby water sprinkler thing. Baptism, that's that thing. Okay. Whoa, ask me about my master's in religious studies, guys. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to make that point, that those things don't necessarily equate for me. And I wouldn't, if I met someone at a festival who told me that they were a Gardnerian high priest or something, I would not automatically assume that they were qualified to speak at a funeral, like officiate at a funeral in any, like, legal capacity. I don't have any legal anything as far as religion goes. Yeah, and that by itself is probably another video. So we won't go there. But yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Okay, bye for real this time.